Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Just some massive news for the Texas Longhorn fans coming out Tuesday afternoon. Former Syracuse defensive lineman Maraad Watson committing to Texas. Now, we talked about him a little bit yesterday afternoon, taking a visit to Texas. I think we all agreed that it was going to be hard to see Coach Sark in Texas let Maraad Watson leave campus without committing to Texas. Lo and behold, come Tuesday afternoon, that's exactly what happens. Not even going to give him a chance to go to Columbus, Ohio. Not even going to give him a chance to go to Athens, Georgia. Texas wanted this one done quick, and we kind of noted that Texas getting the first visit, I think, was important, and it certainly was in this circumstance. And look, very rarely do we break down spring transfer portal commitments and talk about, this changes the way I look at a team going into 2025. This commitment kind of does. And quite frankly, both the big commitments, you might say, that we've seen Texas make with Jack Andreas and Maraad Watson, two massive gets. And this is the benefit of recruiting the way Coach Sark does at the high school ranks. If you do an elite job recruiting the high school ranks, you don't enter the transfer portal period with a ton of pressing needs. You're able to focus on the top targets that you want to go out and land. It's exactly what we've seen from Texas over the last couple of days and weeks. Now, getting into Maraad Watson, number one, we weren't sure about the depth for Texas in the middle of the defensive line. We weren't sure if they had a legitimate difference maker going into 2025 as well. I think Maraad Watson could answer both of those questions. You know he can be a very solid piece for Texas in the middle of that defensive line. Just another body that you can play at the SEC level. Now the question is, all right, how much of a difference maker can he be in the 2025 year? Can he really be a game wrecker? Look, I think there's some confidence to believe that this kid can be. He's no fifth-year senior that's kind of tapped out as a college football player. This kid was a true freshman All-American for Syracuse last year, only going into year 2 of his college football career. He's only getting better as a football player going into 2025. He was very good for Syracuse in 2024. There's a very good chance over the next couple of years that this kid can be elite for Texas in the 2025 year. And that's exactly what they were looking for. We talk about it all the time. Texas checks a lot of boxes heading into 2025. Were they going to be good enough in the middle of that defensive line? Maraad Watson, kind of starts melting away those questions. Now, I want to get into what Maraad Watson brings, what kind of player he is, talk about what this means for Texas and what the rotation is going to look like on the defensive line before we get into it. As always, the Texas fans, appreciate you guys. It's been really fun, talking this program, and it's no secret the fellas are very high in this football team. Can't thank you guys enough for rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Without further ado, let's get into it. Now, what I want to start with Maraad Watson is there might be maybe some Ohio State fans, maybe some Georgia fans coming into the comment section and talking about, well, Maraad Watson ain't that good. He only had 2 tackles for loss and 1 sack last year. Look, you don't play a kid who's a true freshman on the defensive line 60 snaps a game in the month of November unless he can play. That's one of the first things I look for when I'm evaluating these defensive linemen that hit the portal. And yeah, you go back and watch a few games, but how much they play and how much they stay on the football field, that often tells you all you need to know in terms of how a coaching staff feels about the kid. And Maraad Watson, as an 18-year-old in the ACC, did not come off the field for Syracuse pretty much at all in the month of November. That's what fires me up the most. And I think, secondly, he is elite against the run. And you look at the recipe for Texas. Look, we know that Texas is going to be able to get after the passer. With all those edge rushers that they have, kind of headlined by Colin Simmons, I ain't worried a dang about how Texas can get after the passer in those 3rd and long situations. I think the concern a lot of Texas fans had is, hey, can we create as many 3rd and long situations as we have the last couple of years? Maraad Watson's going to help because he is a hammer against the run on 1st and 2nd down. Really strong at the point of attack, can hold up to double teams, can shed blocks, can run the line of scrimmage. He's a big body that's kind of built like a fire hydrant, 6'3", 315, but has really, really good feet and knows how to get off blocks. And that's kind of what I love most about his game. Gives you a little versatility too. Can play him at the nose, can play him at the 3 tech. Really, there's not much you can ask a guy like Maraad Watson to do. where there's some other defensive linemen in the portal that are kind of one-trick ponies. Maraad Watson ain't. As a pass rusher, that's what excites me the most. There's not a ton of pass rush production on the film in the 2024 year as a true freshman. I have no question mark about what he can be as a pass rusher from an athletic profile standpoint. So, really big kid who's really strong, that has a really good get off. He just needs to understand a little bit more and add a little bit nuance to what he can be as a pass rusher. I look at a guy like Cole Brevard, and this is not a shot at Cole Brevard coming over from Purdue. I don't know how good he'll ever be as a pass rusher. Texas brought him in to be a big body that's going to two gap, eat up some double teams, and be a force against the run. I don't think Texas is expecting a ton of pass rush production from a guy like Cole Brevard. Now, Maraad Watson, although is not a proven commodity as a pass rusher yet, I think has a ton of untapped potential in terms of what he can do as a pass rusher on the inside of the defensive line. Now, you look at the depth chart for Texas, this to me was like the last missing piece for this Texas football team heading into 2025. Before we got into, and we got to add the Maryland kid too to this, before we entered the spring transfer portal window, we were a little bit concerned in terms of, hey, how many bodies do we trust in the middle of the defensive line? Cole Brevard we like from Purdue. Travis Shaw we think has some real potential coming from UNC, former 5-star. Alex January, played some solid football as a freshman. We expect him to contribute going into year 2. Justice Terry, true freshman. Hero Kanu, guy that was coveted out of high school but hasn't played a ton. I guess the moral of the story was, how many names did we trust to play a lot of football for Texas in the middle of that defensive line? I think that was a question. Every other part of this team is national championship caliber. And I think the question was, is the inside of the defensive line national championship caliber? Adding a guy like Maraad Watson, not only from a depth standpoint, but from a difference maker standpoint, I think answers some of those questions. Now, I look at Texas and say, we're getting that number up to 5, 6, 7 guys that you trust in the middle of that defensive line. Massive storyline. Nobody likes to talk about depth. You look at all the teams that have won national championships over the last couple of years. You look at their defensive line. Yeah, they have guys like Colin Simmons. They have guys like Trey Moore and Ethan Burke, guys that can really be hammers and playmakers for you, but they're always so deep. Go back to Georgia in 2021 and 2022. Yeah, they had Jordan Davis. Yeah, they had Devontae Wyatt or Jalen Carter. They were also extremely deep. Go look at Michigan in 2023, extremely deep on the defensive line. Even Ohio State last year, very deep on the defensive line. If you want to play your best football in the month of December and January, you got to be deep along the trenches, and Texas has done that over the last couple of years in the portal. That's what, not the last couple of weeks, I should say, in the portal. They had one question they had, and this is what the portal's for. You don't see Texas going out and adding 25 plus guys because they don't need to. Quite frankly, there's just not a lot of guys in the portal that can play for Texas. You use the portal to fill in the cracks. You use the portal to answer those last lingering questions before a season. Texas took that lingering question. Defensive line, interior guys, and they answered it in a big-time way with a guy like Maraad Watson. Then I think the second storyline is, guess who else needs depth on the defensive line in a big-time way? Ohio State. Guess you're going to play week 1, who you're going to probably see in the college football playoffs. Keeping this kid away from Ohio State is kind of like a double win for Texas, keeping away from Georgia. A lot to be excited about this one. We will pause it there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later.